Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Silver Mont. This is my review of Outward on PC. The game is also available on PS4 and Xbone. Disclaimer time. I received a free copy of this game on the Epic Store, that was back when it came out. Due to multiple reasons, I never got around to playing it until quite recently. I was very busy, didn't have anyone to play it with, but some of my friends picked it up quite recently, and we've been playing through it together, and it's a game worth some coverage. It has a lot of good ideas. Now, I've obviously been playing my Epic Store version, my friends have it on Steam. We are able to play together, which I thought I would point out as some people might be wondering that. Overall though, Outward is a hard game to describe, so I'm going to start with the official blurb. No remarkable journey is achieved without great effort. Outward is an open-world RPG where the cold of the night or an infected wound can be as dangerous as a predator lurking in the dark. Explore the vast world of Ori. Embark on memorable adventures alone or with your friends. Yeah, that's a good blurb. Now, prior to playing it much, all I really knew about the game was there is an emphasis on your character being a normal person. You're not the chosen one or a great hero, you're a bum. The game starts out with you needing to pay off a debt on your home. Frankly, everyone in that starting village is a jerk and churlish. But this is a region-based open-world game with survival elements. Your character will get hungry, thirsty, you can get diseases. Don't drink river water like I did and get a disease. Nights and dark areas are extremely dark. If you don't have a torch or a lantern or both, you're gonna have a hard time seeing where you're going. The game is split up into several regions, each of which is their own mini open world. There's a desert, forest, a swamp, and so forth. The game has a fairly robust crafting system, wherein you can boil seawater over a fire to make it into clean water, and you'll also get some salt that you can use for putting on meat, for example. Cooking, alchemy, weapon crafting, there's a good amount of stuff here if you're into the crafting aspect. There are no classes in Outward, but you can choose from various weapons to suit your playstyle. You don't start the game with any magic, but there are ley lines you can attune to. This will unlock your mana, and you're going to have to balance it with your health and stamina. So you could have loads of mana, but it means you'll have less health and stamina. Then instead of leveling up, you obtain new skills from training with characters in the world, or doing quests. For example, there might be a guy who specialises in axes and bows, and he can teach you like survival things. And if you do a quest, you might unlock a skill from that, which, I don't know, gives you more resistance to diseases or hot weathers and such. As for weapons, bows, pistols, staves, spears, halberds, greatswords, axes, hammers, there's a pretty good selection, but they aren't balanced all that well if you ask me. In general, combat is one of the game's weaker points. It feels very janky. I know that isn't a descriptive way to analyse combat, for which I apologise. It's very hard to describe the feel of the combat, but it is not tight, it doesn't feel precise or good. It's very hard to describe what makes combat right in a game. If I'm comparing this to, say, Devil May Cry 5, it would be very hard to put into words what makes one feel so much better than the other. It's one of those things where you really just have to play it and then you feel it yourself. Plus, I don't want to go into like a 20-minute long video about combat. Now, if you're a regular viewer, you will know I've covered a lot of Dark Souls, and you probably know how Dark Souls plays. In its most basic form, Outward has similar combat to Dark Souls in that you lock onto enemies, you have light and heavy attacks, and most of your actions are determined by your stamina. If you roll or attack, it will drain your stamina. One new or different thing here, which I like, stamina and posture are two separate things here. So when you're blocking an attack, it doesn't drain your stamina so much as it drains your posture. Once your posture is gone, once you've blocked too many attacks, you're going to get knocked over. So if you're blocking with just, say, a halberd, it's not going to give you as much posture as, say, a giant shield. There is a sort of combo system in that your heavy attack will change depending on how many light attacks you do before it. There are combat skills as well, some of which are weapon specific, others are just any melee weapon. These often involve things called boons. For example, the discipline boon, if I use that, it will give me a buff that lasts, let's say, 120 seconds, which will increase all the damage I deal whilst it's active. Now, whilst I have that boon active, there is another weapon skill I might have, like, say, a big forwards lunging attack, which will do lots of damage, but it will also consume that boon. You could think of it almost like a stance, I suppose. There is magic in the game, and it's relatively in-depth and interesting. Quite a lot more involved than just, learn fireball and shoot fireball. It's more like you give yourself like a fire aura and then you can make like a fire sigil. Then when you're in the sigil, you can like shoot a fireball out. That sort of thing. I've not messed around with it much myself as it just didn't appeal to me, but there's definitely an interesting magic system there for those who want it. The game has multiplayer, 2 players by default. There's also a split screen on the PC version, I believe. There's a mod though that allows you to increase that up to something like 16, which would be nuts. I've been playing it with 3 players, sometimes 4, and it makes the game a lot more enjoyable. I'll point out, this isn't a game I would play by myself, but with friends, yes. I like that we can sort of share the responsibilities. One player can take care of crafting food, another player can do armor, someone else could do alchemy. In my case, I just carry around the biggest bag that I found. I have a cooking pot in there, and I just pick up everything, and then I just put it all in like our shared treasure stash thing, so everyone else can take care of the money and more important things. I'm just here to jab things real good with my spear, and make sure everyone has loads of rations and water. The game's visuals are nothing to write home about. Performance is a little odd. On my machine, I can run the game kind of like maxed out and get a good frame rate, but my friends were saying they were having some frame rate issues and they had to lower the settings and stuff, so it seems like there might be some slight optimization issues. But when you compare this game with, say Elder Scrolls, which has a much higher budget, you can see how the developers were extremely ambitious, and I respect that. They had a vision for a game. Whilst they might not have necessarily reached that vision in all areas, the sort of polish one might like, perhaps, they definitely put out a very solid game, and it shows you what they were aiming for, and what they wanted you to experience. So if I had to break it down into a list of things I like and dislike, well, let's start with the positives. The game has a lot of nice ideas, such as being able to drop your backpack when you start fighting to make your character more agile, lets you roll better. It's like when you have your backpack on, you're fat rolling, like in Dark Souls, you take that off and then you're fast rolling. It's good. Equipping lanterns onto your backpack and having to choose what you carry in your pockets and what's in your bags, I like that whole dynamic. Splitting the game into regions was a good idea, as it allows you for more diverse environs without being in a snowy area then instantly transitioning into a hot desert. The game has a nice sense of discovery, with being just obtuse and vague enough that you can stumble across things that might serve no other purpose other than to be stumbled upon. See, I rather dislike it in games where every single dungeon or tower has a quest associated with it. Let's say you come across the Keep of Eternal Agony early in the game and you clear it out. Only 20 hours later, you receive a quest called Pumping the Eternal Agony Baron. And it's like, oh, I've already been there, but now I have to go there again because now I have a quest to go there. I don't really like that. I understand why it's there. They're like, oh, we need to incentivize players to go there, but sometimes I like just finding things on my own, and, it's fine to have things in the world that are solely there for the sake of happening across purely by chance. Quite often in Outward, me and my friends will stumble across some sort of point of interest and we'll explore it for the sake of exploring. The sense of preparing for a journey, trekking across the world, that is something I enjoy. There is a good amount of freedom too when it comes to building your character, between weapon variety and skill choices, and that's always good in a game like this with multiple people playing it, potentially. But let's move on to the negatives. The main one would be the combat. It isn't really enjoyable in this game. I find myself wishing that the developers of Dragon's Dogma make a sequel to Dragon's Dogma. They take some inspiration from Outward, because there's a lot of great ideas. Alternatively, if we get Outward 2 one day, maybe the developers of that can study games with satisfying combat and nail that Element X. I'll point out though, the combat in Outward, whilst I don't enjoy it actively, I don't actively hate it either. Like, say, Skyrim, where the combat in Skyrim is so bad that it just makes me want to stop playing that game. Now, of course, if Skyrim had co-op, I would probably be able to overlook the rubbish combat, but hey. Next point. Storage. There is a mod that allows you to access your stash in any chest, but when I say any chest, it means the chests that are storage chests. So you need those chests in, the houses that you can buy, and those can be hard to come across and hard to access. I think they should have a chest in every inn that is shared with your stash. Now, technically, there is a chest in every inn, but it doesn't do anything. It's just like a chest that is there, you can't open it. You might say it's immersion breaking to have all these magically connected chests. Which, that's fine. But you can just say that the inn employs couriers to move your stuff for you. There you go, we hand-waved it away. It reaches the point of just becoming vexing when you need an item that is across the world in your chest. We just have, one of us would have to go back to their own game, because let's say I'm playing my game and I'm standing in my house by my chest, then I join someone else's game, and then I'm across the world. I can leave, go back to my chest, pick something up, and then rejoin them. So ultimately, it's gonna happen, so you might as well just let us do it in a more kind of organic fashion. Now, next up, some of the voice acting, or dialogue in general, is really baffling. Every merchant in the game, I feel like, you speak to them and they say, "This troubles me," when you start speaking to them. And I'm really confused as to what that is about. Like, any merchant anywhere, why are you also troubled? What is troubling you? Is it my money? What ails you? But yes, honestly, those are my only real big complaints with the game. For what it's set out to deliver, I think Outward does a really good job at hitting the mark. It just needs a combat system that has better feedback. Better scaling with enemies would help too. Sometimes it's really hard to tell if you're hitting an enemy that is, God mode compared to you, or if you're just using the wrong weapon type or the wrong element. Perhaps the option to study enemies and learn their resistances and weaknesses, keeping note of them in a monster journal so you can go, okay, now I know that skeletons are weak to this and that. That would be nice. In general, I think they could adjust the difficulty in that sense. I've said it in many other videos, but hitting a human for 20 minutes on the head with a sword isn't hard, it's just tedious. Ninja Gaiden 2 remains, in my opinion, one of the best examples of difficulty done right to this date. All of the bosses in that game can be defeated extremely quickly, because they aren't damage sponges. Damage sponges are never fun to fight in a real-time game, especially if your game is going for some modicum of realism. Like, if you're playing a shooter and you have to shoot a random human 1,000 times before they die, that's silly. If it's a random bandit, why is he able to tank this greatsword to the neck 20 times before he dies, So, if a game like Outward came out with a little more user-friendly stuff, just in the UI and general playability, with a combat system that was a little more satisfying, I'd really love it. As of right now, I think Outward is a pretty solid 7 out of 10 kind of game. Considering the size of the development team, which is probably really small, that's even more impressive. Elder Scrolls and Dragon's Dogma can both learn a lot from this game when it comes to certain aspects. And in the case of Bethesda, it should rightfully embarrass them that they are putting out games on the level of Skyrim when they're one of the world's biggest developers, and Outward has managed to put out a game like this with a budget that I can only imagine is a fraction of the size. All in all, I think Outward's a fun game to play with friends you can sink a good amount of time into. I'll be keeping an eye on the studio and seeing what they do next. Until then though, You take care. Thank you so much for watching. Ciao.
Yeah, you are. I can't. Okay, well, he's fucking dead now. Jesus Christ, stop! Oh, fuck, I died from the explosion! I was too distracted by Alex's body. Where the fuck are you now?
He just keeps teleporting.
Okay,
There's that.
yeah, I fucking got it.